Okay, so let's talk about designing surveys and interpreting results. So what I want to strongly encourage you to think about is the semester project that we have for the teams. And the semester project is outlined in the syllabus at the end. So let me just bring that up for a second. So as you listen to these recorded lectures and read chapter 2 and look at the slides, keep in mind the final project and presentation. Okay, so I've outlined that in one of the earlier recordings here, but you know, just flip back and think about this as you read through chapter 2 and listen to these recordings. So as we go through this discussion, we're going to go through 6 sections. We're going to go through a basic introduction, some survey fundamentals, a little bit about how to questionnaire design, implementing a survey, and then interpreting results. We'll introduce the concept, but then really we'll spend several weeks talking about interpretation of data. So we'll come back to this topic number 5 in much more detail, but we'll also come back to these other topics as we go through the semester. So this is really an introduction to getting a survey done, and should get you going for the semester project. So as we've talked about, you know, statistics is used in all phases of research, including business research. And so what it allows us to do is to extrapolate from a sample and obtain valid information about a population from looking at a subset of that entire population. But to do that effectively, we have to figure out an approach, and that approach is going to figure out understanding who our population is, who the target is, and then being able to figure out what we're really after, what questions are we trying to answer, and then from there we'll try to develop some good questions, some good surveys to help us approach that answer to the questions that we have. So here's the basic steps of survey research. The first thing we want to do is state the goal of the research. So we have to figure out why are you doing it, and that's why I've asked each of the teams to think about what is significant about your project and why is it significant to the stakeholders. And so that's the single most important thing in my perspective, is to get a clear idea as to what you want to do, and then pursue that aggressively in terms of your survey design, questionnaire, and collecting the data. And step 2 is to develop the budget. Well, in our particular case, when we go and think about the budget, we're really thinking about our limitation of time. So we have to recognize that the scope of the survey that you're going to do in your project is going to be limited by in the amount of time we have left in the semester and all the other competing priorities that each of you have as we go forward. And then we're going to create a research design. So we're going to look at the target population and then come up with a frame, and then figure out how you're going to sample that, what the appropriate sample size is, and then you'll go through and choose a survey type and method. And so that, will you do it by email, you do it in person, you do it web-based, etc. And we'll look at that in a little more detail. Shush. I know you're doing a good job. I know, buddy. Nobody's tougher than you. Nobody. What do you want to do, buddy? On the TV. Okay. No, I watched it. Anyone want cereal? No, but I mean, sounds like you have watched it. So then we'll look at designing a questionnaire. It's a good idea to pre-test the survey instrument / questionnaire, make some revisions as needed, and then we'll talk about administering, collecting the data, and then finally analyzing and presenting the data. There's a handbook of collecting and evaluating data using surveys, and I've posted that on Blackboard. So as you and your team start the process of doing the survey, you may find this tool helpful. Okay, so let's talk about some survey fundamentals. So the first thing we want to know is what are your questions? What do you want to know? Okay, so this is the single most important thing, and we want to make sure that we really are very specific about what we want to know. And I posted a Khan video on Blackboard, which let me show you briefly.
But we have 6 possible.
Okay, so what I'm about to show you here is a Khan video that talks about potential surveys and trying to really be specific about the question we're trying to answer. So I'm just going to show a brief portion of it, but it's posted in the week 2 videos. So I would encourage your team to take a look at this to help you really focus in on the question that you're trying to answer.
Only interviewing people on both well-paid people and even the money need there, so they're probably not
Okay, so so what do you want to know? And then you need to ask, do you need data to answer these questions? So that may seem silly, but that is not always the case. Sometimes we can make observations, sometimes we can do other things, but so in any case we have to figure out what data we need. And then next we'll have to ask, how do we collect this data? So we'll talk about that in a little more detail. So there are many ways to collect data. We can do direct measurement or observations, we can use existing data sources, we can do focus groups, or we can do personal interviews, or we can do surveys. And surveys are really what we're going to focus on here, and something that your team is going to work on as well. One of the big things about surveys is that it allows you to do a little more probing and get a little more information, and maybe do some correlation and some comparisons. So what we're hoping with the survey is that we can draw up we can extrapolate or draw some inferences from the sample that we take. So to do that, we have to make sure that two things are fundamentally in play. One is that the questions that we're asking are unbiased and help us answer the question that we're after. And next, we have to make sure that our sample is representative of the entire population that we're after, because typically we're going to do a very small percentage of the overall population, and we have to make sure that the demographics line up with the overall population or target population that we're after. And the higher, obviously, the higher the level of confidence or precision you want, the bigger the sample size is going to be. So for our particular projects that you're going to work on this semester, we'll have some leeway there, but we still want to follow a disciplined approach so that we end up with a product that that has some validity. So here's 5 important steps involved in designing a survey. The first is to clearly define your research objective. What do you want to know? Okay, that's clearly the most important thing. And then who do you want to know it about? Okay, so what's the population? Who's your target population? And then what's your sampling plan? So how are you going to go about collecting that? And then you have to design a questionnaire and then do a pilot test and retest of your survey. So here's some more details about clearly and concisely your overall research goals. And that's really the first thing I want from the teams, is for your team to understand what it is that you want out of the research you're going to do, and why it's significant, and why it's significant to the potential stakeholders of the survey you're going to do. So let's talk about sampling. So the first question we want to know is why we sample. Because we have limited resources, time, money, etc. And we're hoping that if we select the right sample and do the appropriate type of questionnaire, that we'll get data that is representative of the entire population. So we have to ask, what's the population of your interest? Doctors, students at MCPHS? If so, which students? And so forth. Can you sample the entire population? Now, in most cases, the answer to that is no. Right? So when we talk about the population, we're talking about the entire group, and then we want to take a sample of that is representative of that population. So 3 factors influence the sample. The procedure you're going to use, the sample size, and the participation response. In some situations, you might go for the entire population. If it's small, if you have extensive resources, or you don't expect a very high response. Okay, so now we want to talk about developing a sampling plan. So we want to talk about the technique that's going to be used. You're going to do a simple random sample, do a cluster sample, systematic sample, etc., and then the number of people needed for your study. At the end of the day, the goal is to randomly select a small percentage of the population that will in turn represent the ideas of the population of a whole. If we achieve that, then we have a successful sample. So here's some sampling methods, and here's a tip. This will be on quiz 1. So a simple random sample just uses random numbers, select items from the list. Systematic sample, select every nth number from a list Stratified, you select randomly from within defined strata by age, occupation, gender. Cluster, it's like stratified, except stratas are geographical, zip codes, etc. Do a judgment sample. Okay, so if I have expert knowledge, I choose typical items. Sometimes we just do convenience, right? Stand outside the door of a cafeteria because that's convenient. Or we could do a focus group, which is in-depth discussion with a particular group of people that you hope represent the demographics of the population. So you can do it with or without replacement. So, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Okay. And then there are some computer methods to help you do some sampling approaches, and so you can use Excel, and there are a variety of resources online, random.org and so forth, that if you, once you've defined your population and you want to select a statistically valid sample, there are methods and tools out there that can help you. Okay, so just a little more detail. Simple random sampling. Subjects are chosen by random mechanism. Kind of like lottery numbers are selected. Stratified, first to divide the population into strata, and then randomly select subjects within each strata. Cluster, you can cluster your populations and then randomly select number of clusters, and then you could sample all units within the cluster, etc. Systematic, we talked about this, about just selecting every X person that walks in the door or on the phone or whatever. And then sample size calculations. We're really going to come back to this and talk about what makes a valid sample size. But as a rule of thumb, if you have 30 or more people in a sample that you've interviewed, you're starting to approach something that is going to be meaningful, assuming that your sample is representative for your entire population. Okay, so the next step is going to be questionnaire design. This is section 3. So I'm going to allow you to watch a video that I think is well done. It talks about 10 factors that you should consider when you're designing your questionnaires.